Thank you, David, for having me. Evan, Ian, Jerry, the whole Eurasia group, BMO group, for setting this up. It's been an incredible day. There's seldom been something so rich in content. Now I'm going to bring it down. But I also want to thank you all for staying to the bitter end, and there's upside out there. Now, look, it's customary at, we've all been at Canada-US events over the course of our professional lifetimes and others, personal. And it's customary, sort of wax lyrical about our deep ties, longest undefended border, celebrate our cultural exports, Bieber to Bertinsky. Sorry, I was stuck after Bieber for my next B. And it's also customary to anticipate the return of the Stanley Cup to where it really belongs. That's right. Got to keep the faith. And all of that, look, all of that's true. All of that's true, and I shouldn't, I don't mean to downplay it, including the cup coming back, to be clear. But, this is also, and we've heard some of this cut throughout today's sessions, last night's dinner, as I understand it. This is a serious time, and it's a serious time that requires a new perspective. It's a time where, around the world, authoritarianism is on the march. It's a time when small L liberal values of tolerance, equality, liberty, and opportunity aren't only challenged, they're openly mocked. It's a time when some leaders around the world are accumulating power only for themselves rather than to promote the common good. And we need to be clear-eyed about this, realists about this, realists about the dangers that all that combination brings, but we shouldn't and cannot be defeatist. The enemies of liberal democracy are cynics. They don't believe that progress is possible. And more importantly, they want their citizens, and actually our citizens, we see it with interference, they want our citizens to think that progress isn't possible. And they make the charge that to believe otherwise is foolish, it's elitist. They divide the people before they divide the spoils. And we would be doing their work for them if we become negative. Look, we have challenges, we know that. But we always have challenges, we always will. But we also, in Canada and the United States, almost uniquely, we enjoy opportunities that our grandparents and parents could scarcely dream possible. We absolutely live in the two countries that the rest of the world wants to move to. And so this, despite all the challenges, should be our time, and we should make it our time. And I'm going to spend the last of my 6.5 allotted minutes to talk a bit about how we can turn the current upheavals in the global economy to our advantage. Of course, it starts in a situation like this with recognizing reality. And that reality is that we're living through a hinge moment of history that was sprung by a series of crises in finance, in health, in energy, and in geopolitics. And the thing is that each of those shocks, and they were major shocks, each one of them, didn't just hit the overall level of activity in the global economy, but they lowered the pace of growth, lowered it to a pace of growth that hasn't recovered. And the fact of that is that it is constraining now our governments, our companies, and our families, constraining their ability to cope with a much riskier world. And at the same time, in parallel, the global economy, as we've been hearing today, the global economy is being rewired across trade, across energy systems, across intelligence itself. Trade hasn't grown in aggregate across goods, services, capital since the global financial crisis in 2008. It's a shocking statistic, but it's true. And more fundamentally, what's happening is that trade is now being reordered by a series of protectionist measures, measures to de-risk commercial relationships, de-risk geopolitical relationships, to nurture domestic industries, and also soon, and you just heard a preview of that in the last panel, soon to avoid carbon leakage, because being low carbon is becoming a fundamental driver of national competitiveness. And all of these dynamics, and you live this in your day jobs, and we heard it in the panel before the most recent one, they're being reinforced by the early stages of an AI revolution. So we have a rapidly changing world, and it's a world in which we, as Canadians, it's true for America, but you have a little more influence, we as Canadians can no longer rely on the rules-based order for market access. And nor can we as Canadians, but yes, you as Americans, nor can we as Canadians afford the growing arms race in industrial policies. So speaking for Canadians, or to Canadians, we need to be smarter. We need to focus on key sectors. We need to create a coherent tax system. We need to help our people get the skills to master their machines. And we need to build our core competencies from clean energy to compute. And what we also need to do at the same time, and we can do this at the same time, is to help shape the new international order with our like-minded partners, above all, the United States. Canada is a middle power. If we're not at the table, we'll be on the menu. Question is, being at the table, what's our recipe? And I'd suggest, to start, we can draw inspiration from the heroes we celebrated just last week at D-Day commemorations, where, in the words of Emmanuel Macron, on y sent vibrer l'histoire, l'héroïsme des morts et celui des vivants. On y lit la grandeur d'un peuple prêt à mourir sur un sol qui n'est pas le sien, mais pour une cause qui est la sienne. They died on a soil that wasn't theirs for a cause that was there. And our cause, the United States and Canada, our cause is built on values. Liberty, on which our nations were founded. Responsibility, because we all must be engaged. Solidarity, because we only truly succeed when we all do. Sustainability, for those who come after us. And dynamism. Dynamism to harness the power of our innovators, our entrepreneurs, and our builders. And there are no better countries in the world than the United States and Canada to define and build this new order, to put it into practice, and to make it work for all of our citizens. From a Canadian perspective, we're going to need a new plan. We must become the essential trading partner of the United States. And that means being a clean energy superpower, the most reliable supplier of critical minerals, part of the solution to food security, leveraging our most sophisticated real assets, investors, and banks in the world, and becoming the backbone of enterprise artificial intelligence. Secondly, we need to build an economy that works for all Canadians. And we're not going to do that by well-intentioned, reflexive spending that treats the symptoms but doesn't cure the disease. Because we can't redistribute what we don't have. And we can't pull our weight abroad if we're weak at home. So when we debate competing priorities here in Canada, we should first acknowledge that we have less to spend because we become less productive. The solution to that issue is not failed trickle-down economics. Slogans, denials, defeatism won't make our businesses more competitive. We must start with shared missions, affordable housing, universal and accessible health care, education for all and for all time, and a clean economy both for the jobs it will produce today and the better future it will secure tomorrow. We need to build in ways that recognize our common values and our responsibilities as well as our rights. And as one crucial example, First Nations must be core partners as we build the next chapter as an energy superpower. Canada must welcome, foster, and celebrate those builders and entrepreneurs that can help all Canadians thrive, and ensure that all Canadians can develop the skills they need for the new world to come. Because while the new economy will create enormous opportunities for high-paying jobs and new careers, but if we're in denial, it's going to be a recipe for unemployment and disappointment. And finally, Canada must pull our full weight in NATO. This is no longer an option. It's an imperative. The only question is whether we do so strategically in ways that strengthens our sovereignty and builds our economic capacity, whether we're dragged kicking and screaming by our allies, or, worst of all, whether we are compelled to do so by tragedy. So I'll say to my fellow Canadians, now is not the time to just dream of a Canadian century. It's the time to act by shaping this once-in-a-century moment to our advantage. We're entering a decisive decade where the clash of geopolitics and economics will determine the prospects of all Canadians and, I'd suggest, the prospects of every American. And this should be our decade. Mr. Ambassador, I'm speaking directly to you, no country is better positioned to be your partner than Canada. We can be the leaders together in the energies of not just the present, but of the future. We have the skills to put the new era of intelligence to work for all. We can be the magnets for the best and brightest from around the world. And we have the values to move forward together. But there's only one thing on which we're going to differ. We are going to have to bring that cup right back to Canada. Thank you very much.